I've got conflict, you've got conflict, all God's children got conflict. You know, one of the things that Barb and I have learned is if you have any relationship with any time and experience, you're going to experience conflict. And you know what, Jack and Brooklyn, Barb, sure showed us in that drama what happens when we hurt one another.
But at times, we don't think about conflict. It's really, really hard to get on the other side of an open loop. And especially during those early stages of a relationship, we aren't thinking about conflict resolution at all. One person said this, that your relationship is very much like a bank account. Either you're depositing into it or you're withdrawing from it, especially during those times of interaction and during conflict. We'd love to give you some strong coaching, and that is this, that during conflict resolution, we really need to make sure that we are connecting during the other times, the other seasons that we've coached you about during the other sessions. Why? Because when we connect in a healthy manner, that's when we can make sure that we have deposits that are building resiliency in our relationship that we need during times of conflict.
You know, when conflict arises, we need to learn about what are those patterns in relationships. Dr. John Gottman, who's an esteemed researcher, has identified 4 different horsemen. And when these 4 horsemen are present, he can predict with almost certainty whether or not you will experience a divorce. Now, here's the first thing. It's called criticism. Now, criticism is different than complaining or crabbing about your mate. It's being very personal with that criticism. When a spouse is being criticized, you know what they do, or what I will do, is I'll want to put up a wall of self-protection, and stage 2 is defend myself. Then you can begin to experience an emotion that is very, very painful. It's called contempt. And when contempt is present, that then leads to kind of a stonewalling or a withdrawal. And the research indicates from Dr. John Gottman that men will stonewall and withdraw far more than women. So when you've got those 4 elements, men and women, in your marriage, you know what? You need to really take a gut check and a heart check, because you need to learn how to disrupt that and learn how to move through the stages of resolving conflict. Now, we call this opening and closing the loop. And we wrote a book called Healing the Hurt in Your Marriage that will help you, whether or not you've experienced hurt in past relationships of your marriage, or from a pre-marriage perspective, if you're learning how to resolve conflict before you step into it.
In Colossians 3:13, it says this, bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you, and over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Well, let's open up the loop, look at this diagram, and examine this process.
You know, a conflict starts with an offense. And we all have offenses in a relationship. And sometimes those offenses are small offenses. Sometimes they're perpetual ones that we do over and over and over again. And sometimes they are major betrayals. And yet when we come to an offense in a relationship, we come to the first fork in the road in a relationship. And that is deciding whether or not the relationship is going to trump the issue. And I want to say a little bit more about this. In this culture, often when there is conflict, here's what happens. Your flesh and the enemy and the culture will tell you to walk away from the relationship. And that's what happens so often. People give up, and they give up before they realize that on the other side of that restoration or reconciliation is really the building of a persevering love in marriage. And so one of the things we want to challenge you to do is to have the relationship trump the issue. And when you conclude that, friends, then you will have unconditional love in a marriage, and you'll have the safety and the security. It's like having a safety net underneath a trapeze artist that allows you to take risk and experience pain. And you don't use it as license to wound one another, but it's there to protect you so that you can get to the other side of those open loops.